Look what we did with NEWJEANS. I think $80 million in like the case of Danielle is just such a ridiculous number. I highly doubt that's going to be justifiable in court.
Why are they so good at creating superfans?
Every great mind from all the other labels has essentially been poached by HYBE at this point. There were more producers and artists falling in love in the studio than the labels wanted. I think this is the unpopular opinion. I don't think that the system that is K-pop works if get your license here for what, $400 with lessons included?
Yeah.
And just convert that shit after the 1 year international license and convert it when you get back to Sweden.
We might have just discovered a hack.
This is a major hack.
Yeah.
So do your part here and save a bunch of money and be able to drive.
Well, man, I'm super excited to. Well, I mean, we've met once before.
Yeah.
But I was really excited for this podcast, particularly. I think because there's so much crossover in our industries. Me as an actor, and then you obviously as a producer and songwriter. I have worked with a lot of the people that you've written songs for.
Yeah.
Well, not a lot. Well, not a lot, but I've worked with ENHYPEN.
No way.
Yeah, I was an actor in one of their music videos.
Dude, which one? You gotta tell me. Is it? I hope
it was the one directed by the director of Momkap and what's the other? And Cole.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you know the name of the song?
The song's name was it was called. It was 2 years ago, April.
2 years ago, April. That could very likely be one of mine. I was still working with them back then.
No way, really? Oh man, how I'm blanking on the song. Let me tell you.
Yeah, please. That'd be such a small world moment.
I'll tell you. It was called. Bro, it was like a music video concept. The entire music video was like a short movie concept.
There's been a couple of those. That does it knows it somewhat, but it was really hard for me to say which one.
The music video was called Untold Romance. God damn it,
dude! That's the other one from that album. I did the other single, so
okay.
We almost were part of the same project.
Yeah,
that would have been crazy.
So Untold Romance. So I was a police officer in the music video, and I had to like stop them and like. Where are you boys headed? Like,
I love that.
So just heading down to town square is what he says, and then I'm like, you better stay safe out there, like that. Yeah. So that was me in the music video.
I think it's always so funny because like we're somewhat we're all connected to the whatever it is, the Hallyu, the K-wave.
Yeah.
And obviously you're like front end camera side, like in front of the camera.
Yeah.
I am so behind the camera as can be. And
but you're like even before the camera started rolling.
Exactly.
You're like way back in the pipeline, like in the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah, and I think one of the things people don't really know about the industry is here we are so separated from each other. Like and in every aspect. Like I never meet people in the videos. I never meet the choreographers. When it comes to the film directors, extremely rare. It's like if they're doing a concept video, maybe then we'll talk to the film directors and work the song in a way that like helps achieve their visual vision.
Okay.
But that's maybe like 1 out of 10 songs is like that.
Okay, so walk me through the process of like I'm gonna write a song for let's say ENHYPEN, right?
Yeah.
Walk me through the process from like start to where your responsibility ends.
So it's so funny because with these bands it's also different. Every company operates differently, but and also which stage you are in your career, it gives you or takes away different freedoms and opportunities to sort of express your creativity, right? So like when I was just starting off the industry, I didn't have the connections like that, so no one was hitting me up saying, "Hey, can you make this?" So I was just throwing stuff at the wall, going through my publishers to try and, hey, we have this kid called Alex who's making some songs. Any of this spark any inspiration for you guys that you might want to take this and run with it? And in those scenarios, the early days, I would send, I'd send maybe a song every other week to, let's say I was ENHYPEN, I knew they were working on an album. So I'm sending something every couple weeks to them during that phase.
What are you sending? Like, are you sending a song that's been produced, mixed, mastered, or just written, or like, are you sending like a letter with your lyrics? Like, what are you sending?
That's fair. That might not be that obvious. So so what I'm doing is I'm sending a fully mixed, mastered, produced, written, recorded with my voice in English version of a song to them. And then they get to shop that around in their creative department and see if they want to roll with it or not. And if they do, then they tell me, yes, we love this vibe, change this. And then, well, a lot of this was during COVID, right? So then it would go to their in-house producers to record with the band. Then they would record, send me the recording. I'd give feedback, maybe make it a couple changes, add whatever effects that I had on my vocal on the original version onto now the new Korean version, and then send that back to them. And that is typically where my responsibility ends. Since moving to Korea, my responsibility sometimes is also doing the recording with them and coaching them and telling them how to sing, everything from sometimes phonetics to vocal technique, and then also putting together the arrangement, not just of my English version, but then also making it bespoke for the Koreans. But that's something that I've only been able to do since living here, and I wouldn't say that's standard for the industry, because also just like there's not a lot of us foreigners that speak Korean enough to be able to do that. So that's
what I was going to ask. So do you speak Korean as well?
So I speak survival plus Korean.
Okay.
And so like I've done this very pragmatically. Like I've learned Korean in the context of things that I need to know. So like going to restaurants, talking to cab drivers, that stuff, easy peasy. Then the one thing where my survival plus goes beyond, I guess, the average survival plus is I know how to talk in the studio. I know how to say a little bit of music talk and actually guide the performance and give that kind of feedback in Korean. So I've learned that. But then if I have to talk to the bank, I can't do that.
I see. So your Korean knowledge extends to as far as it is required for you to be able to complete your tasks.
Yes.
But it does not extend to you being able to take the songs that you've written in English and then having them translated into Korean, because most of these songs I feel like are both English and Korean at the same time.
Yes.
Like they sing in English and then they'll switch over to Korean, right?
Absolutely.
Is that all then done by the agency on the latter parts of the process?
Well, so this is one of those things that got grandfathered in from the early days of K-pop. So, back in the early days, everybody had in-house teams on all parts of creative, right? So not everything was outsourced international. That's a consequence of just the industry booming, right? And you only had X amount of super talents in the industry here. Industry grew, suddenly there's more bands, more output needed than the local creatives could output, right? So, but in the early days of K-pop, why you had the English and the Korean was mainly, these companies wanted to get international level songs. They had their 5 to 10 super producers that were able to make hits, but now then, they reach a point where they're making more bands that need more hits than they can produce. So they start reaching out to Swedes, Americans, and Brits who are leading the pop industry at the time. They're getting those English songs, but the record companies, they want to still maintain some control of the copyright. So they stopped accepting songs in Korean. So if I were to work with a Korean person, we'd still write the song in English back then, because the record labels wanted to insert their own in-house person, whether it be the band member or one of the in-house producers, to write the Korean lyrics so that they control part of the copyright and can then have influence over ad placements or just the sync in general. So that's like movies, ads, video games, so on and so forth. And that just became a standard practice. We're going to have one of our guys do the translation. And that just sort of stayed all these years later, even after, Korea has developed more. You have more Korean writers that are active, and we could be writing songs fully in Korean. But this thing never went away. And even now, most of the companies don't even have their in-house lyricists. The lyricists have created their own little companies where whether it just be a solo trading or a small group of maybe 5 to 10 lyricists, none of these companies have more than 10 people, but you have lyricist companies now,
and that's all export.
It's all outsourced.
Yeah.
So the in-house aspect of it doesn't exist anymore, but the culture that we will always have a separate person come into the lyrics still exists.
And I guess for you that's great, because if it had to become like just super in-house Korean, then that would mean way less opportunity for you, then, right?
Well, in a way, yes. So and also in a way, no. Well, because the beauty of it when it was fully in-house Korean, where okay, we'll have our lyricists do it, was it eliminated a lot of the local competition in the beginning, which in a way was very advantageous to get in. Now a lot of the Koreans that are coming in, a lot of the Koreans that have stayed in the industry, they speak great English and can write, and even to the point where they write great English lyrics now. But 10 years ago, as this transition was happening, there was a language gap, which was definitely an opportunity for us foreigners to come in and actually have a bit of an advantage, since they only wanted English songs. On the other hand, the Koreans that were in the market at the time had the chance to be on these big songs from huge writers in the West, people that worked on Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga, and actually be collaborators with them. So there was a win-win, but it was definitely a door in for those of us who wanted to get in.
So, I mean, if you wanted to start, it's not just somebody who's like good at putting pen to paper, being able to write catchy or music that could be consumed easily. You actually need to have a full-on musical background, right?
So this is the whole in a way, it's great and that it's bad, because yes, you do need to. It's not enough to just send your lyrics on a piece of paper. It's not even enough to send just a melody. Just even writing the musicality. We've gotten to a point in the industry where you have to do it all, and this is a large part, one, because of the technological advancements which have allowed us to do it, but also we lost a lot of the the music industry shrunk dramatically after pirating, and then streaming took over and didn't really replace what the industry was before then. Radio and album sales in the West were the big chunk of the pie back in the day, and Korea is a bit funny because it's not a pro rata system for radio here. It is a profit share on how much profit the radio stations make, which is very little. So radio,
because people don't really listen to radio.
I mean, you do. You're in your cab and they're playing the radio, but so it's not based on how many plays. Let's say the radio company makes $10 million, but their costs were $9 million, right? That means every single song that was played that year is sharing a percentage of that $1 million, which is a bit ridiculous. This is definitely, I feel like, one of those shady dealings with whoever has the airwaves and the government. They're like, yeah, we'll help each other out here.
I see.
Not a lot of countries have that setup. I can't really think of any off the top of my head. Maybe I think China even moved away from that. So it's when it comes to what was left, it means, well, you can't pay sessionists, so you can't pay the bass guitarists to come in and play anymore, that were the guitarists, whatever instrumentalist you want to bring in. The executive producer now has to be you. You can't, and the engineer that used to man the board, you have to be that now as well. You also have to be your own demo singer, because demo vocals, I mean, gosh, like I remember back in the day, we were paying $1,000 for demo vocals before the industry changed. Nowadays, I'd say the standard rate for demo vocals are somewhere between $200 and $300. So I mean, even that's gone down tremendously. And now with AI vocals, I mean, is anyone even going to pay for a vocalist anymore? Because if you sing the melody, the AI will give the performance, and it's like, is it as good as a top tier singer? No, but it's good enough to where it can sell the song potentially if you work with it, right? So if you don't have a voice, but you have a vision and you have a bit of time, you can work it to a point where it gets there. So all these things that surrounded the producer and the songwriter disappeared and forced you to be all the parties in one.
I see. And so obviously that is beneficial for you because you not only know how to produce, but you also play a whole wide range of musical instruments, right?
Yes, but I'm one of those. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. So I'm okay on the piano. I'm okay on the guitar, but another beauty of modern technology is there's infinite tape. So if I get 20 takes, I can get it. If 30 takes, if I need 100, I have 100 takes.
And that's all you need to do in order to get a workable demo out that you can then send over to an agency.
More so than that. I mean, because of that, even if I'm not the best instrumentalist, because I have all those takes and infinite tape, I can get it to a point where it sounds release ready on my own from my little home studio.
I see. And that's the exact process that you followed in order to get, let's say, your first deal or your first signing or contract.
I didn't have all the skills for my first deal. And so then
How did it come about then? Just want to say quick thanks to the sponsors, because without them, I won't be able to do this podcast. 저희 팟캐스트 메인 스폰서 프리덤의 감사를 인사드립니다. 프리덤 없이 저희 이런 팟캐스트 진행하지 못했을 겁니다. 프리덤 지원하려고 하면 제 디스크립션 모든 링크 확인해 주시고, 그리고 온라인 스토어도 이런 멋있는 옷 구매할 수 있습니다. 아니면은 오프라인 스토어 압구정에서 방문하러 가도 됩니다. 프리덤 많이 응원해주세요. Freedom, thanks for the support.
Well, I had to find collaborators that had the skills I didn't. So that was my shortcut to getting full ready demos before I developed all my skills. So in the beginning, I'd say my skills were more the lyrics and then maybe some songwriting, and then over time I picked up more of the other elements like mixing and more production and track making. Right, but in the beginning, I was a singer songwriter, just being guitar. And then I found other people around me that could do the other parts. I found someone who was great with track maker. I found a great beat maker. I found a great mixer. And I would work together with these people to make these ready demos. So a lot of my early credits, you'll see 4 or 5 people on, sometimes almost 10 people. And we're just all splitting small pieces of this pie. But over time, we learned from each other and started to be able to take on projects with smaller teams.
I see. So what was your very first, not your first breakout hit or big one, just what was your first project that you got paid for?
First project I got paid for.
What song was it?
The very first project I got paid for was a super long time ago. It was a fluke. I got a song in the industry way earlier than I deserved. I had a lucky moment where I was able to get a song with one of the Super Junior members called Henry Lau.
Okay, yeah. I've actually I know some of the Super Junior guys.
Get out. Yeah, no, it didn't pay much, but it was, it was food on the table for a couple months. And covered rent, right? So it was, and this is back in 2013.
Oh wow!
But I'd say like the real things that started paying me was when I worked on, and this is like later BAP SHINee albums, like 2017 or so, and and that's where I started to see a bit more money. Suddenly, it's more than just rent. It's I could potentially get a nicer house.
Okay.
And then in around that same time frame, BTS went kaboom boom.
But before that, there was, you said SHINee, right?
Yeah, so SM was sort of where I started.
Okay, so because I've now come to get to know Mino quite well because he's big into triathlon and high rocks and training, and that's also where I spend a lot of my time. So we train together at like a bunch of the same gyms. So was that with him then back then? I assume with their group.
This is so early in my career where I didn't get to necessarily even meet the groups at that point. So I've met one. I've met 2 of the SHINee members. I met Taemin and Key.
Okay.
So I haven't met Minnow.
Yeah.
But when I worked on those albums, that was all remote. I did all that from Sweden, and I just would send the songs.
So you were not even in Korea then?
I wasn't even in Korea.
Okay.
Then I would do the trip to Korea, and I'd go say hi to the company. I'd work out some songs in the building, but. And this is also after, this is a strange time in the K-pop industry where they didn't want the artists meeting the producers. There were a lot of scandals early on there, and I'd say like around mid-2010s, early to mid-2010s, there were more producers and artists falling in love in the studio than the labels wanted. And obviously, if any of that went further, it could be career ending for all these bands. Yeah. So and the way SM handled this back in the day was hilarious. Because they had this tower in Cheongdam, and what they did was they put all the artist studios with the recording, where they would have the Korean like lyricists and recording engineers. Yeah. They would all be in the basement, and then all of us, the foreigners who would come and do the writing, and then the handful of Koreans that would also be like their super producers back then. Yeah. We'd be on the top floor, and we'd have our set of studios. Okay, and so the only time we would meet the artists was because there was a smoking room downstairs and there was a coffee machine. Yeah. So, but and then over time they got smart. So okay, we had to smoke on the rooftop, and then the Korean producers got smoked downstairs. Yeah. But the one thing that always stayed downstairs was the coffee machine. Yeah. So the only time we ever went down and met the artists was at the coffee machine. So I'd have chats with the Girls' Generation members, the NCT members, and the few SHINee members that I've met. Yeah. By this coffee machine downstairs, but we were never supposed to talk. And if someone from the company saw us talking, they'd be like, "Hey, shouldn't you be working on something?" Yeah, they'd be like, "Can you get back to the top floor?" Oh, they hated it.
That's great. Okay, so this is what I wanted, because you work with Girls' Generation as well.
I never worked with Girls' Generation.
You were in the building with them. Because I actually, again, just that's why I said there's so much overlap with our work. I did a drama with Soyeon. Last year or the year before, called The First Night with the Duke, and then I did a Netflix show called Zombieverse with Taeyeon. also 2 years ago. So just through like all of this work, I'm just meeting all these members, and I listen to 70s rock and roll. So for me,
Very different.
my music taste never really overlap. But after becoming more entrenched in the industry, I've had the opportunity now to, as I said, work with BTS or ENHYPEN or Girls' Generation or 2PM. I've done shows with some, like I did a drama with Octagon and whatnot. So now
cool.
because of this, I've started to absorb some of the K-pop music culture and become really interested in it, not only in the music but also in the culture, right?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting for me to hear this because you always hear stories about the strict lives that these artists need to live. I think a lot of them, as they get older, they start to have more freedom. Because I also did a drama with Jisoo. Called Newtopia.
Yeah.
And I think because with them, they're a little bit later in their career.
Yeah.
So their stardom has outgrown the company almost to the point where they can do this and that and like be more free on variety shows or go explore like dramas or movies. But if you're starting out, I fully understand how the agencies keep very tight control on the movement of the artists.
Well, I mean, have you heard about how the slave contracts, as they called them back in the day?
I have heard of them, but I obviously I don't know the details. I think you probably know.
Well, so it's essentially the first contract after when they debut, right?
Yeah.
And those, I think back then they were standard 7 years. So during those 7 years, they are under the ball and chain. Like they do whatever the label says, and they stay within those parameters.
Yeah.
When those 7 years are up,
Yeah.
if they are in the green, they renegotiate. And with that renegotiation comes the freedom. And then they're suddenly involved with creative. They can choose what opportunities outside of the company they want to do. And really it comes down, and they get much better percentage splits on the projects they do, right? So before they break out of those 7 years, they can't do anything. They just have to listen to whatever they say. Afterwards, they get a great deal of power where even, and especially nowadays, the companies don't have much control over. So I would say before COVID, if I had written a song and worked with the creative team at the label and those songs were approved, I don't think I'd ever gotten a rejection after that phase was done.
I see.
Post-COVID, especially a lot of the criticisms over the slave contracts and they got more freedoms in their contracts after that. I've now had a few times where in both directions, artists have said, no, I don't like the song, I reject it, even after the company's paid me.
Okay.
And the other way around where, hey, what happened to that song I liked? Let's get it back.
Yeah.
And the artists have that swing now, which they did not have 5 years ago. Not a chance. So it's changed. But also, I think a lot of these big superstars who have gotten bigger, and now that they're older, they've renegotiated 2-3 times and got more and more freedom incrementally every time they renegotiate.
Yeah. Do you think also these older artists or more popular artists that have become like the Taeyons or the Jisoo's or the Jennies, do you think them advocating for younger artists to have more rights or freedoms, having been on the front line fighting a little bit of a battle so that these newer artists now have a little bit more freedom. Do you think there is a little bit of that at play?
I think this is the unpopular opinion. I don't think that the system that is K-pop works if the younger stars and the trainees have too much autonomy. It's like military boot camp. There's no Navy SEAL what it's called, soldier in training that has autonomy. And it's for a reason, because they have to go through that program to become a Navy SEAL.
Right.
It's the same thing here. A lot of the smaller companies try and give the artist autonomy. And it's very rare that these companies actually have breakouts. Whether it is they don't get the skills enough, the output isn't high enough, whatever it is, something falls short when the kids have too much autonomy because they don't know what the direction is. I mean, I think about my younger life a lot as well. Time frames are so much harder to understand when you are a teenager because a month feels like a year, and doing this same repetitive thing, the wax on, wax off, just doesn't make sense. With age, you get what that is, and a lot of but to get back to your question, are people fighting for that autonomy? They are, and if anything, it's actually causing a decline in the K-pop industry. So you have a lot of the recruiters are looking outside of Korea for the trainees now because a lot of them are demanding this autonomy, or the parents are demanding that autonomy, which is a giant risk factor. So that doesn't just impact the labels. This impacts where they get their money from, which is oftentimes venture capital. And what are they looking at? They're looking at risk.
Yeah, they're trying to mitigate risk and trying to, just maximize profits, right?
Yeah.
Which brings me now to a very current issue, obviously. If you look at NewJeans, some of those members, like Honey is Vietnamese. As you're saying, like obviously some of them were not locally grown talents. They were just, maybe they were locally grown, but they're not local. So they come from overseas. Like Danielle is from Australia, right? Do you have a take on what's currently happening with NewJeans?
It's a wild one because the whole thing with Danielle was such a curveball of them, because she accepted coming back, and then they kicked her out. I mean, it's a power play. I don't. What's the end game with that? I mean, because ultimately they're hurting their own bottom line to make a point. And it's a point that I don't think is going to have any effect because the change has already happened. You have these younger artists who already want the autonomy. Scaring them with this, is it going to make a difference? I don't think so. I think this is just going to piss people off, and they're going to lose money off this. I think everyone loses from this scenario. But I think there is this illusion that, yes, our new trainees aren't going to mess around with us because look what we can do look what we did with NewJeans.
I see.
But I think they're wrong. I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, what do you think is next for somebody? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what historically has happened, or if there's ever been a case like this, such a public just feud, and how it's turned out in the past of K-pop. But I do wonder how this will turn out for somebody like Danielle, who is obviously very young still.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to think, like, how would I have handled a situation like this if I was 21, 22, 23, like, potentially having to get sued for tens of millions of dollars, and then just the whole world watching. It's so public. I don't know how I could have handled that even at my age now. So I do wonder what the near future holds for someone like her.
Well, there is a case of something like this that happened years ago with a band called TVXQ. If you remember them.
No.
So they were they were SM, one of the early SM bands. This is like BoA era stuff.
Yeah.
And they were originally 5 members. Now they're just 2. But the other 3 sued and got out of their deals. And it was a giant suit, and SM did everything they can to try and dismantle whatever power they had, whatever connections they had. And it got to a point where if any of us who were working with SM at the time worked with any of the former TVXQ members, we'd be blacklisted from working with SM ever again.
Oh, wow.
And so it was pretty, like, okay, we stay away from them. And they were, but what they did, they started their own companies. They started putting out music themselves. They'd reach out to people. They'd create pseudonyms for producers to come work with them. Like, hey, you can't use your name, but we'll pay you a little extra and we'll give you a fake name so you can work on this. And, they weren't being sued for the same amount of money that Danielle is right now, but they were able to create parallel careers and do well enough to still live good lives. Now, I think $80 million in like the case of Danielle is just such a ridiculous number. I highly doubt that's going to be justifiable in court. There's just no way that they can justify that number. Either way, there's gonna, let's say she loses this one. I think she has an amazing ability with her community that I see a scenario where let's say the number lands at like 10 million. I think she could do a GoFundMe to get her out of that to continue making music. I think that $10 million in the GoFundMe would actually reach the 10 mil, and she'd be able to continue making music. And I think she's gonna have a great career off of that. Yeah,
probably. Do you think she'd probably go solo? Or
I think in that scenario that's what you do. I mean, because well, all press is good press, right? And in this scenario, now she's probably the most famous member all of a sudden because of all the headlines, right?
Yeah.
So coming out of this, use that notoriety to be able to bail out of this situation and then release music off the back of it. I think there's a potential for it to be a hyper fandom after that.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like this phoenix being reborn from the ashes, and
100%.
now I mean, there's the group they're there and they're going to be big, but then you know, out of this big debacle, you know, you come and you just have this meteoric rise, even more than what you could have dreamed of with the group potentially, based on this life altering event that happened to you. And a lot of it, like, I feel bad because I feel like a lot of it, almost none of it is their fault. You know, they're just pawns in a game.
They're children, right?
Exactly.
And you know, it's funny because I remember seeing these girls running around the halls at HYBE like years ago, and I just didn't know what these kids were doing in a building full of grown-ups. And you know, then seeing this all happen to them, it's heartbreaking. But the thing here that I see as a very likely scenario is it's a Beyonce breakout moment, Justin Timberlake breakout moment, Robbie Williams,
and that turned out great.
You know, yeah. Every single major boy group, girl group has their breakup.
The Harry Styles or
right, yeah. And they become ultimately bigger than the group itself ever was. And I feel like this is a setup that leads to that. And HYBE are gonna not. They're creating potentially a monster for themselves.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that would be quite the comeback and quite the FU if she came back. And
and a lot of people want it.
And if she just became like this global megastar, because she has all the makings of it. She speaks,
100%.
She speaks native English. She speaks good Korean. She's young. She's got a built-in fan base. Yeah, I'm curious to see how this whole thing plays out, because obviously HYBE are the biggest music label, not only in Korea, but they're one of the biggest in the world right now.
Oh, yeah.
Tyla, which is a South African artist, you know, my fellow countryman, she just signed with HYBE as her international agency.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is huge, you know, because with her new song Chanel, like people, like the biggest K-pop stars in the world are doing her dance trend or her TikTok trend.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, that's a testament to how big she is, and the fact that she's now joining HYBE is a testament to how big they are. You know.
Well, also they need each other because what Tyla has in eyeballs, she is not delivering in terms of, I guess, hardcore loyalty. So when she did her shows in America now, no one showed up. And one thing that HYBE have mastered is creating superfans. So in the sense of Tyla versus HYBE, I mean, that's just a symbiotic relationship that needed to happen, because she has all the eyeballs in the world, but she can't get them to make action. While they know how to make action and want more eyeballs.
Why are they so good at it? Why are they so good at creating superfans?
Well, you know, every generation of K-pop, they've, you know, you take the old model, you add something new. It's just multiple generations of entertainment Darwinism, right? And at the point that they've gotten now, they've just procured so much talent of the industry. Every great mind from all the other labels has essentially been poached by HYBE at this point. There's a few of the great minds have gone to some of the other labels, but like I'd say HYBE has been able to poach the vast majority of them. So they're really sitting on such talent in that building when it comes to the creative direction, marketing, and they have the means and the minds to just to execute.
Yeah, and there's this well of information and knowledge that they've just iterated over for the last the knowledge from previous companies, and then obviously their own projects, where they're just getting bigger every time. From BTS to, I mean, ENHYPEN now.
Oh yeah,
they're just so. I didn't realize how big they were until I did that music video. And I kind of made a little mistake.
Oh no!
I after the music video was done, on the way home in my manager's car, I uploaded a post, and it was nothing related to them at all. But I think I mentioned them, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it was a really big issue. Like I got into a bit of trouble with my agency and their agency as well, like quite a big amount of trouble. And so obviously I apologize, because I was just like excited to have worked with them, right? And to have worked with this director who I really love. And in the end, it all turned out okay. But I realized, like, something that I thought was just so completely insignificant was a huge thing for them. And then I realized how much control and how much they're aware of everything that's going on around their artists. It was it was mind-blowing for me to have experienced that.
Well, you know, and on that same point, I do feel like they miss out on a lot of organic opportunities because they close off so much of, I guess, well, just normal happenstance and interactions with people they're working with. And the industry has also changed here. People don't necessarily want them get kept the same way as they used to. So this is where I do see a big mistake in the K-pop system, and some companies are adapting. And you know, again, back to the entertainment Darwinism that K-pop is just so good at doing. I'd say 3-4 years ago, you know, the first viral post I was ever part of was I did this documentary on K-pop stuff years ago. And, you know, they keep a lot of my backing vocals on some of these songs.
Okay.
And I was talking about, you know, with ENHYPEN, like, oh, yeah. So, and you know, the intro of one of their big songs is a song called Fever.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm singing the intro there, and I sing a lot of the parts in the song. They just kept my vocal in many, many sections. It's one of those, like, I kind of feel like that song should have been a feature more than just be on background vocals.
That's amazing. Like, that's your song,
yeah,
man.
Dude, I'm everywhere in that song. And so I'm, you know, I was in the room, I was just like, you know, this part is like, that's me. And then I woke up the next morning. Someone had cut just that one part of the interview.
Yeah.
And I saw, like, it woke up with millions of views. And I was trending as, first, white guy ruins K-pop. And then it was old white man ruins K-pop. I'm like, dude, I'm 27. What the hell?
Bro, it's just because we as, like, white dudes, like, I have this conversation with almost every guest I get in here. We just look older naturally, right? And in general, genetically, Asians look younger. But then the K-pop groups, the idols, they look even way better for their age, just because they're going through like just the best skin routines and treatments, you know, since being teenagers. So I feel for you, brother. It's old white dude, and you're 27.
Bro, it's
like,
hilarious.
God damn it.
I was like, what do you mean? I'm not old. I'm still what? Hey,
I'm not even 30. Jesus.
Yeah. No, it was painful.
Yeah.
And then you just have all the comments saying, "Go die, go die, go die."
But why?
Well, no, because I ruined their fantasy. But you know, fast forward a few years later, now I'm quite active on social media, and I talk about the songs and what I do behind the scenes quite a bit. And this is how I see the landscape has changed, because that same information, 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, people freaked out and just it ruined their day.
Now they want it.
Now they want it. And like, wait, what else happened? What tell us more.
Yeah.
And so the want has completely changed. The interaction, the parasocial relationship that they want to have with the artist goes deeper than it used to be. It's not just an ornament on the Christmas tree. Now they actually want to grab the present, unwrap it, right? So it's you know, they want more in their hands, which the artists themselves, just from the screen, well, let's call it the two-dimensional world, or that they can look at. They want a third dimension to it.
Yeah.
And that's behind the scenes stuff and interactions with other artists they like that might not even be from K-pop. They want that more and more and more. And the K-pop companies have been slow to move on that, outside of just making a feature happen. But you know, after the feature happens between two like major K-pop artists, major Western artists, what were the interactions between the artists after that? They just never talk to each other again.
Yeah.
There's no, you know, you don't see the story build between these two massive cultural powers colliding.
Yeah.
And it's so many missed opportunities. So the same thing that got you in trouble that day from that video, and what got me to go viral as the old white man that ruined K-pop, is the same thing that they crave now.
Interesting, yeah. It was such a crazy thing. Like, what happened was, I had uploaded a photo in the car on the way home, in my manager's car, just had a shoot, and somebody one of my followers screen captured that, uploaded it to a community, and then somebody that monitors in HYBE the community saw that, contacted my manager, and it was like instantaneous. And they were like, "Oh, you need to take it." And I took it down immediately, but it was too late. Like, the floodgates had opened, and so luckily it never became a big thing, because I don't want to deal with none of that HYBE smoke, you know? But it's interesting. And it's funny you mentioned this cross-culture pollination and the opportunity that it presents, because look at K-pop Demon Hunters.
Oh, absolutely.
What has happened? This is the most streamed Netflix show ever.
Yeah.
Ever. And it was in English, about Korea. Like, people are hungry, you know?
Absolutely. Well, you know, at the same time, I do feel like that marks the end of its underground appeal, or whether...
If that
leftist center culture.
Yeah.
Because this is the Despacito moment that Latin music had a few years ago. And Latin music came back after that, but it died for a few years, right? K-pop Demon Hunters, I think, is that same moment for K-pop. And because if you look at the numbers, around everything else, they've dipped so heavily after K-pop Demon Hunters. And this is where K-pop has to evolve now quickly in the next few years, because the interaction that exists was made deeper with K-pop Demon Hunters. People had it in their living rooms and their homes in a way that didn't exist before. And if they are going to develop beyond just the cult fandoms, they have to change something.
They're gonna have to evolve, yeah. And it's so crazy for me to see how far K-pop has come from me not knowing what K-pop was when I moved to Korea in 2015 to now. I watched the award, the Golden Globes the other day, and Leonardo DiCaprio was talking about K-pop on there. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were just on a podcast where they mentioned K-pop Demon Hunters. So the reach is now completely global to the point where it's not just some kind of esoteric music genre in Korea.
Yeah.
No, it's completely global as any band out of the States would be, or any group or any hip-hop artist would be. It's completely taken over the global music scene.
Well, it always cycles, and I think when we appreciate in entertainment, we do fluctuate from things wanting to be super polished and grit, and we go back and forth between these. And K-pop has been that polish. We had Backstreet Boys and Spice Girls way back when, right?
That's when we were growing up.
That was when we were growing up. And then that went away, and that got replaced by High School Musical and Glee. And then that went away, and then the thing that replaced that was K-pop. But then all the things that happened in between, then you had the hip hop moments where everything was produced, on a potato, right? And then you had your rock moments as well, where it's just more distortion than Sonic, right? And these moments go in between each other, back and forth constantly. And as soon as one of these disappear, a new, say, polish thing comes in to replace it. And K-pop has been that polish. And I think what people admire and find in it, especially within other entertainment industries, is how much, the word I'm looking for, the excellence of it, right? It's excellent. It's not necessarily the most out of the box, but it is executional excellence.
Yeah. It's been refined and polished, and what you get is this really well-rounded, easily accessible, easily what's it? The digestible piece of content or material.
Oh, yeah. And if you look at what's happening, like the choreography nowadays versus 10 years ago, 10 years ago, anyone could learn one of those dances. Now it's like you have to be a dancer to do most.
Like a top tier dancer.
No, it's pretty advanced stuff now.
Yeah, I like the dance on the bouncy music video.
Thanks, man.
I was doing some research. I was like, this is pretty sick. This is pretty, what is that your favorite song? Like out of your whole catalog? Like what's your?
That one has a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Just because it's such a fun one. And the same thing. Like just like the making of that song was just such good vibes, and everyone was just messing around.
Tell me more about the making of the song.
I can't really do that.
Okay.
So there's some of the companies don't want me talking about what's done behind the scenes in too much detail, and so. Well, most and some are super chill with it, but with them in particular, especially at this phase of the career, I like certain names are there, certain names aren't, and no one wants to be like, oh, this member is more involved, so we should like them more, and I get it.
I see. So are you referring to the making of the music video then? Right?
Oh no. So that the song itself, the music video. This is before I moved here. So this is right before I moved to Korea. Was with Bouncy. So I came to Korea to make the song.
Okay.
But then the music video that was done when I went back to Sweden.
Okay.
And but the thing that was really crazy with that one was, and the one thing I will say about it was, the actual members of the band were there when we made the song.
Yeah.
And that was.
So you were producing in studio.
With them.
Okay.
So gosh, we were a whole army of people in the studio that day. It was awesome. It was magical. Just so much energy.
Yeah.
But then when I'd say with the choreo and the impact that song had, that one did something that I didn't expect it to do. And in terms of reach into the West and how it broke that band in particular, like ATEEZ becoming, I'd say, at least one of the top 3 bands in America now is just, I think that song is what brought them over there to an extent, which is wild because there's like almost no English in it.
Yeah.
But you know, before that song, I think they were growing, but like just seeing how that resonated, and it converted so many people from casual listeners to diehard fans, and I didn't expect that song to do that, and just seeing that happen in real time was crazy.
Yeah. What label are they under?
So this is what's also special about them. They're not part of any of the majors. They're a small indie label called KQ. They're the only one to top the Billboard 200 charts, not being one of the majors. So, you know, that's like, I mean, I don't know how they did it. It's really like, I'd say their magic has been just good vibes, and that's gotten them so far.
Yeah.
They're one of the exceptions to that rule I was talking about earlier with the super hardcore strictness, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what are some of your other, I mean, if that's one of your special ones, what are some of the other ones that you really enjoyed?
You know, and another one, and I don't talk about this one nearly enough, I've noticed looking back at my content, but
Here's your opportunity, man.
Right? Loser Lover by TXT is one that also is a special one for me. And, you know, because I grew up as a rock guy, right? I always listened to rock, and that had so many rock elements in it, right? You know, it's all guitars all the way, live drums, and somehow that worked as a K-pop song and became a major hit in K-pop, even though it's rock all the way. And like when I'm not doing K-pop music, I'm making rocks. And so the fact that I got to do like a rock song that became a hit within K-pop was just, I mean, that was such a special moment as well. And with that one, the other thing that I think is hilarious, in that era of TXT, what they would do at the end of every video was destroy a Volvo. And in some way, I'm just like, is this an inside joke? Like, are you guys trying to say something? But they kept blowing up Volvos back then. And so at the end of that video, kaboom, another Volvo. I'm like, all right, guys, I see what you're doing. Thanks.
Blow up Alex.
And the funny thing is, it's the exact same model of Volvo that that like my parents had back then. This I didn't drive, but like so I'm just like, that is our car. Same color, same everything. They knew. I'm like, how do they know?
Yeah.
So
that's cool. I mean, it could be a metaphor to say we're blowing up Alex in his career. This man's he's blowing up. You know, he's gonna be regarded as one of the best, not only K-pop producers but just like producers ever. You know,
I'll take it.
It could be a sign of things to come.
Just don't blow up my actual Volvo, please.
Or Alex.
Or me, yes. If you are going to do it, make sure I'm not in the car.
We need more big hits. So, okay, if it's not, then those two, I specifically have a list of some of your, that you've mentioned, some of your favorites. SUPERM, Tiger Inside, Fantasy Boys, ENHYPEN Sacrifice, Team Dash, Blessed Curse, Fever. Amongst those, or any others, what are some of your other?
I mean, you know, the Tiger Inside is a special one because that's also one that, you remember I was telling you about earlier how, you know, in the beginning, your bigger room is more people. You have to divide and conquer because you just don't have all the whole skill set yet. What was great with that one is like on the songwriting song of that song, I was the only songwriter. So it was me and a track maker. And so that.
What's a track maker?
So making like the drums, the bass line. So the writing of the lyrics and the melody, that was all me. And I just had my first song with BTS come out maybe a month or two before that came out.
What song was that?
That was We Are Bulletproof, The Eternal.
Okay.
And you know, with that one, you know, a ton of people were doing different parts on that one, right? But then with Tiger Inside, you know, so people was like, okay, he got lucky, he got a BTS one, good for him. But then with Tiger Inside, people saw that it was like, they saw the producer, the track maker, and then they saw me, and I was like, wait, Alex did that on his own? Holy shit. And then my inbox got flooded with all the labels. That because of that, I got to work with ATEEZ. That was what opened that door for me.
Okay.
And you know, ultimately I have much bigger songs than that, but that it was because they saw my name there as the guy that did that, the whole songwriting, the rap, the melodies, the backing vocals, that was all me. And it just opened up so many doors because then it wasn't just, oh, Alex got lucky one with BTS. It was then, oh crap, he solo carried that one.
Yeah, I mean, luck is just where hard work meets opportunity.
100%.
And if you've been, you know, grafting away, creating songs on very rudimentary instruments without like a knowledge of some of the instruments or the tools that you're using, but you're just there working away, it's gonna happen at some point, you know.
Absolutely, and that was that. So that was definitely the turning point for me. And then from that, I got to start working with Enhypen, and I did. God, I don't even know how many songs I did for Enhypen.
Yeah, you've done quite a lot with them actually.
Have I done 10? I've done over 10, I think, for them. And then you know, off the back of Enhypen, and with ATEEZ when and that was just like, you know, right after. So I got to, you know, it went from getting Enhypen to go from, you know, being HYBE's smallest band to I think now they're HYBE's biggest band.
Yeah.
And then same thing. Then right after I was done working on the Enhypen stuff, I got into work with the ATEEZ stuff, and then kind of same journey there. Now so like two of the biggest K-pop bands, I got to just be part of their journeys to the top. And
meteoric growth, yeah.
It's been
so that could be attributed to, you know, partially to some of your actual writing.
Well, yeah, I got to, you know, I got to see the songs and the impact they had from day one, and you know, I got to, you know, it's really cool to just, you know, I don't know how big a part I played in there, but I feel like I played a part in the journeys for these bands, and that's just been so cool. I mean, I'm not done. You know, we have a new ATEEZ album coming out in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So this is super excited to see like how far they go as well now. You know, it's
How many members are there in ATEEZ? I know a lot more about Enhypen. Tell me more about ATEEZ.
You know, gosh, how many are there? I have to actually list the names. I don't like. This is, you know, I don't consume the music anymore. When I was starting off, I did so much research into everything. I knew the names of every idol in every band. I knew, you know, their birth years, who was the rapper, who was the singer, who was the leader, and who was the visual, all that stuff. And now once I moved here and I'm deeper in the industry, I don't have to do that anymore. So like now I have personal relationships with some of the people in these bands, and I don't necessarily pay attention to the entirety of it anymore. And you know, part of it is you know, just, you know, life has gotten better and I don't have to grind as hard. You know, a bit of the fire is not as large as it used to be, which is I'm thankful for. You know, I sleep better at night. But then I can't tell you how many there are. I think there's 7 of them.
Okay. And you have a personal relationship with the group?
Well, no, not every member. So
okay,
like,
with
you know,
some of them.
But some of them, yeah, absolutely. And it's been one of those, you know, there's a lot of them. I don't think anyone in this industry has a personal relationship with like the entire band unless you're in house fully, right?
Yeah, but also like they're all individual people. It's hard
That's
to
the thing,
have like, oh, I need to visit member X on Monday, member Z on Tuesday. It's just not practical.
Absolutely. But you know, with most of the bands I work with, I'll be close with 1 or 2 of the members, and then you know, and then my communication line with these bands that goes through that member and their creative at the label side, and so you know. I don't really hang out with them at night. Very rarely. I'll do dinner with someone, right? But typically it's just, you know, we're talking to Kakao. It's like, yo, man, you want to work on something in this style? I'm like, oh, let's go, man.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily talk to the other members, and then they'll throw whatever we make into their group chat, and then the other members will check it out and talk. And this isn't like specific to ATEEZ. This is just like all around, right? Yeah. And you know, so but I don't really necessarily hang out with all of them. I'll like have 1 or 2 guys I hang out with a man, and that's kind of what I keep it to until we record, and then I'll meet them all and say hi. But that's like the only time I see them all is when we're recording or at the show.
I see. So you mentioned like you were the only writer who got attributed to that one song. What was the name of the song?
Oh, Tiger Inside.
Yeah. Okay. So with regards to copyright, do you then own the copyright to that song?
Well, so I have to split it with my publisher, of course, and so you know I have my royalties there that come to me.
How juicy are those royalties now, man? Like how profitable is this job for you?
The downside with that one in particular is that band disbanded. It was a culmination of EXO, NCT, a SHINee member, and sadly, you know, there was difficulties. The fans didn't necessarily like that a lot of these members were moonlighting in another band.
I see.
So because they're not touring and actively pushing it, the royalties from that one aren't as juicy as they were while the band was still together.
Yeah.
But for the bands that are still together, it's quite nice, and it keeps going. So you know, now especially with ATEEZ and Enhypen touring in America and in Europe, where for example in the UK, 3% of the ticket price goes to the songwriters.
Okay, that's huge.
Oh no, so when I see they're in the UK, I'm like, let's go,
baby, making it rain.
Oh, absolutely. And then you know, like, you know, I just moved my organization, so I'm not part of the Swedish songwriters community called STIM. I'm now a Korean songwriter. So I'm part of what's called KOMKA.
Okay.
Which is the Korean ASCAP, if you've heard of what that is. So the ASCAP is the American Songwriter Association.
Right. It's
KOMKA
an unfortunate name.
one.
ASCAP.
It is. Oh my gosh, it's hilarious. But no. So the one downside with moving to Korea is it now takes longer to get the money from Europe and America to Korea. But the upside is being here when the albums come out, I actually get paid immediately now, which is incredible because otherwise before it was the other way around. I'd have to wait 18 months to 2 years to get the money from Korea.
That long.
So this is a funny chapter in life when. So after Tiger Inside and BTS, and then I started working in HYBE, suddenly we're topping the charts every couple months. I think I was I was number one on some chart on Billboard for like 50 weeks in a row there.
What?
It was, with various songs. Like as soon as one would go down to second place, I'd replace it with another song of mine going to first or something. And I had that shift going for almost a whole year there. But while that was happening, I was completely broke.
Wow.
Because the money hadn't hit yet.
Yeah.
And you get some upfront fees for delivering. Like, if I do the backing vocals, I might get a few $100 here and there. If I do the production, I might, work to the production, I might get a couple $1,000. It cover rent. But, beyond covering rent, I knew I had all this money coming, but I had, essentially nothing in my account for 2 years waiting for it to land finally, right? Yeah. And it was always so many strange interactions where I'm like, hey guys, we're splitting, and people just look at you like, what do you mean you're splitting?
Yeah.
What the hell, man?
Don't you write music for BTS?
Right? No, that was a very strange part of life where it's like, I know I have all this money coming, but I have none of it, and I'm not going to have any of it for another year and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and on top of that, of course, I also know what's going to be coming out with these big bands, and, the sales don't fluctuate that much, so if the previous album did 1 million or 2 million sales, it's very likely to stay somewhere in that ballpark for the next one. So, you do the math on that, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm looking like I'm about to be set for life, but not for another year and a half to 2 years.
I need to survive the next couple of years.
Well, and the immediate impact is when people think you're loaded, no one is really willing to do favors for you anymore.
Yeah.
And also, like, I also know when you're super, super rich, you get a lot of stuff for free.
Yeah.
But there's this in-between phase when you're, like, young and people think you're really rich.
Yeah.
Where, you want to go shoot a video, it's like, yeah, man, I'll do it cheap, $10,000. I'm like, I was thinking like we could like split the YouTube ad revenue.
Yeah.
But it's like, and like suddenly like the people that you just do stuff with, like, just off a vibe, like, hey, let's make a thing. Everybody wants to get paid all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But then, so everyone thinks you're loaded, wants to get paid, and you have no money.
Yeah.
And so there was a year and a half, 2 years, I was just completely crippled. I couldn't collaborate with people because everybody was expected to get paid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a really strange time.
So that's more, I guess, more of the downside, but something that you only kind of have to endure for a short period of time until the initial royalty checks start coming in, right?
Yeah. Well, and on the other side of that now, it's wild because, those 2 years felt so long.
Yeah.
But now on the other side of it, I hardly remember it. I
Yeah.
hardly remember the feeling of it.
Yeah.
It's so strange to look back at it and remember that as a reality.
Yeah.
Because now it feels like a distant memory, and it's not that many years ago. I really got active in K-pop and really started rolling. I started going really hardcore K-pop in 2017, but then when I started getting the bigger songs, they started trickling in 2020, and then 2021 was the first really crazy year.
Yeah.
And so really, like when I started getting those big payouts was late 22, early 23.
Yeah. Is that the main source of revenue for producers and songwriters? Then?
Oh yeah, the royalties for sure.
The royalties.
Absolutely. The royalties are much bigger than your upfront pays.
Okay.
Back in the day, if you were one of those top producers, like your Timbaland, you're a Stargate, Pharrell Williams, they were charging $100,000 to do the production.
Yeah.
But I don't even think they charge that much these days. It's definitely the upfront fees have dissipated quite drastically over the years.
Yeah. But it is more about what you can make on the back end. I mean, if you're a movie star as well, you're getting paid $500,000 or $1 million for a movie. It's great if you don't have any money. But if you have some security and somebody says, "Listen, I'm not going to pay you anything, but you can get 1 or 2% of the revenue of the film in perpetuity." If you think about some of the richest actors right now, if I told you it's Sam Worthington, you would say what? And yeah, you know who that is?
I don't even know who that is.
It's the main actor for Avatar.
Oh, what?
Only because he took a very, very small salary upfront guarantee, and he took a percentage of the box office revenue. And Avatar, the three of them have garnered over $6 billion together. So can you imagine it? And that's exactly for you guys the same. Like if you can just kind of survive that initial period and then start raking in the royalties for the songs, it's just way better.
Also it's the same thing because then you're also negotiating with publishers. So it's more similar to the book industry, right? When you're negotiating with a publisher, we have royalty advance, and so, well, how much money do you want? And there's two things to balance there, right? Because the more money you ask for, the higher percentage they're going to want, right? But on the other hand, if you say too low a number, you're green in the book, and they're not that incentivized to work for you. So you need to, balance those two to the right amount. But I'd say that's probably the most impactful thing for any producer, songwriter getting into the business, getting their first publishing deal. Well, how much can you survive on and still have them motivated to work for you? And I think it's if you can make your first publishing deal stay under 100K, and you can with that budget, and say you're able to get 50K, if you can make that 50K last 2 years, and you just grind it, I think you're in the ultimate situation to actually make it.
So that's what I'm curious. If I was an aspiring writer producer, and you had to give me advice to start out now, well, like, what would I need to do to get where you are now? Well, what would I need? What are my first steps?
Community, either building it online or building it with other people in the industry or people who are aspiring to get into the industry in your local town.
So singer-songwriters,
producers, artists, beat makers, any group of creatives where you can develop your skills and collaborate. And it doesn't need to be physically in the same place. It can be online, but you need to enter a community, because the odds of you developing those skills fully and getting access to the world on your own is very low. I mean, the number one thing in the industry that's going to lead you to where you want to go, which is success, is ultimately network. And you need to have those skills to open doors, but you also are gonna, once you have X amount of skill, your friendships and professional relationships are going to open many more doors than your actual skill.
I see. So having musical talent and knowledge and skills related to music producing is important, but also having interpersonal abilities and skills in order to network and push yourself further in the industry, you would say, is just as important, right?
I would say it's, in the beginning, probably developing your musical skills is the most important thing. But as soon as you achieve some sort of professional level in any of the domains, whether it's just on writing, just on producing, just on mixing, any one of those domains, you achieve a professional level, I think at that very moment, your networking abilities immediately become more important than your musical abilities.
Interesting. So then, now I've developed my skills to a certain level. I'm in South Africa, and I'm interested in the K-pop industry. What would be the immediate steps that I would need to take in order to give myself a shot at coming here?
It's a lower hanging fruit than you think. What's great with, if you're coming from a smaller market, is getting access to the major companies. Your Sony, your Universal, your Warner is going to be somewhat easier in that territory. Working with some local artists to build a portfolio is going to be a little bit easier in your local territory. There's just less competition. You don't have giant American, British songwriter producers actively pursuing the South African market. So you're going to be able to get access to building a professional portfolio in your local market, and once you do that, and you don't need much. I like to say, if you have 3 songs that are banging, especially if they're released, your doors are open for you. If you have 3 incredible demos that aren't released, but you have good relationships, the doors will open for you. Both of these ways are just as viable, but you either need an industry person to vouch for you and then be able to show some of your work and have the other person on the other side of the table agree with that, or your music has been approved by the world, even if it's just your local market, and then you go to a new market with it. But just getting some proof of what you're doing, and then rolling with that and networking. And that bar is so much lower than people think. If you have, it's you don't even need to have millions of streams. If you have a few 100,000 streams, the million is more than you need.
Streams on
Spotify or SoundCloud. It's if you have something to show traction that you can make things move, you can exponentially grow that with network.
And then from there on, like let's say now you've done that, you've got 500,000 streams, for example. Now I want to come to Korea. I can start reaching out to smaller or mid-sized companies or labels to see if anybody would be interested in potentially producing with me, or I would need to get a publisher first that I would have the connections.
Well, that's where, you know, if you have the social proof and you've gone the route of the internet loves your music and are really like, you know, you have a cult following on the internet, that can be the odds of one of those cult followers being a producer or songwriter in Korea is fairly high with even a fairly small amount of followers. They might not even follow you, but they'll listen to your music when it shows up, and it's you know it's easier to actually catch them than you think. You accidentally run into people that have heard your stuff quite frequently. And on the other side of that, okay, let's say you don't have that online cult following. Well, then yes, you're going to need a management or a publisher that has the connection, because if you send a blind email and they have not heard of you, no matter how good your demos are, they're not opening it.
Yeah, because I'm sure they get a bunch of that.
Yeah, that's why the two routes are like, they're not, the path forward from them is not completely the same.
Yeah.
But both viable ways to go.
But the point is then, as you mentioned earlier, is like create an online presence and put your music out into the world.
If you're from a very small territory, yes, that's how I do it. If you live in a major city that has a music presence, Berlin, Stockholm, London for Europe, maybe even Paris and Barcelona, and then for America, Nashville, LA, New York, even Miami these days has become quite the hub, or Atlanta. Then from there, you'll be able to have, there's people in your town that you can access, and you don't necessarily need to go the online way because the network exists in your town. If you're from any of those cities, you're good to go. You can network without having to go online. If you're not from those cities, I would advise going online.
Okay. And how many writers or producers that are foreign like yourself are there currently that you are aware of in Korea that have achieved success to a level similar to yours?
It is a lot less than you think. Most are still doing the back and forth between their home country and here. And the ones who are successful are doing it very frequently. The really successful ones that haven't moved here are still coming every other month.
So you're saying you need to commit.
You have to commit. There is I would say the people that are living here who are foreigners who are crushing it. I mean, there's I can count them all on my two hands.
Really?
It's, you know, and I'm not sure why this is. People, I mean, I understand for the Europeans, because Europeans don't necessarily like leaving their home country, I've noticed. And the Americans are much happier to leave and try and go explore new places. But Americans are also just really happy to get on planes. So I mean, they're happy to do the back and forth. So it's just ended up in one of those things where not a lot of us end up moving. I ended up moving because I don't know, I always wanted to live in Asia, and I fell in love with the place, and especially when I started working on the ATEEZ stuff more, and you know they really brought me in as like a family member, and so I was like, you know, I have community here, and my old publisher had started his own publishing company, and I was like, dude, I'm with you all the way, man. Let's go. Let's make this thing big. So I got on the plane, brought my suitcases, and moved here. But you know, that was also because of just a set of circumstances where I was like, let's do it. Also, living in Sweden as a young person is not the most exciting thing.
It's a lot of darkness in winter, and a lot of not going out because it's goddamn cold.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? Like everyone is. I think this is not just Sweden. This is Scandinavia. This is Germany. Everybody wants to be so grown up at a very early age. Well, you'll notice like if you're 30 in America versus 30 in potato Europe, the 30-year-old American is considered young. The 30-year-old in that part of Europe is considered an old man.
Now we know what they called you, old white dude.
Right? It's all the Germans and Swedes hating, right?
Yeah.
But so the perception is very different. So you know you're going out in your 30s, and depending on where you are, that's seen as pathetic or you're still happening, right?
Wow.
And being in a country where being 30 meant, what do you mean you don't have a child and a wife yet? What do you mean you're still renting? What are you doing? You know, versus coming here where like, yeah, of course you live in a shoebox. But what do you mean? Of course you're supposed to be out. What else are you gonna do? I was just like, this is I want stuff happening. And stuff happens here. Sweden and I think most of Europe is a slower life, which can be great later on.
For some people.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
But for me and what I want to do, it's just like, no, I want action.
But also your career kind of requires you to be in the thick of things, to be in the action, to be in one of, not Asia, but the world's most bustling cities.
Absolutely.
Whether it be art, fashion, music, beauty. Korea is at the forefront of all of those industries, and if you want to succeed in any one of those, you would need to be there. It's great making music from Sweden, but you're not gonna make things happen. You're sitting at home in Gothenburg,
right? Yeah.
You need to be here in Seoul.
Oh yeah. Well, back to what we were saying earlier. The number one skill to develop once you've achieved a professional level is your network.
Yeah.
And the network there is. I mean, it's still somewhat of a hub.
Yeah.
But compared to here,
you can't eat Korean barbecue in Sweden with the right people.
But Seoul's a tier 1 city. I mean, I think some people try and claim Stockholm as a tier 1 city, but that just isn't true. Not a chance. But so especially when you're in your younger years and you need to develop your network, getting to a tier 1 city is the best thing you can do. I'll say this: my quality of life, and especially if I'm gonna not to get too deep into like personal finances, but my net worth has shot up dramatically since moving here. Yeah. The opportunities, the side quests, the ability to be part of projects in a more meaningful way opens financial avenues in a way that didn't exist while while working from abroad.
Yeah.
So the economical impact has been just insane. And it's also had this side consequence of, because the work is so plentiful, the projects are ongoing and the pay gets higher, my lifestyle hasn't kept up. So it's been like an accidental perfect work hard and get my savings in order in a way that I was completely unintentional.
Yeah. And you're enjoying your work and enjoying life while you're doing it, and your lifestyle doesn't need to chase your income. And then by the time you're older and you maybe want to settle down or get married, because you're like, oh, I have all of this safety and security because I lived a frugal life, because I was already doing what I loved. In any case, I didn't need money to supplement my happiness.
Well, because the actions are fulfilling you, and the actions are continue happening. And everyone lives in a shoebox. Yeah, that's just like the only people who live in big houses, I think, are generational wealth or content creators.
Yeah. God damn it! Well, I mean, speaking of content creation, you've definitely become more active on social media recently.
Oh, yeah.
Do you feel that's due to your desire to kind of tell people more about the work that you do or about the artists that you work with, or is it more of just a self-promotion mechanism?
It's definitely a self-promotion mechanism. So what I noticed happening in the industry, back in the day, remember when we'd buy a record and you'd see the producer. We knew who Timbaland was, right? And we'd know the names of these big producers.
Timbaland, Pharrell,
right?
Jay-Z,
before they released
Kanye West, one of the best producers ever. Yeah,
we knew the names of these people, and then their names disappeared.
Yeah,
and well, like I told you earlier, they would be getting paid $100,000 just to get in the room, right?
Yeah.
Their fees went down after they stopped being as famous, and some of them went out and did their own art projects to maintain it. So some of them can still charge that, but the rest of us who didn't go out into the world and make ourselves known, we had to cut our production fees significantly. Yeah. And then, having been here now, and a few of the local producers in Korea have some pretty large followings. Yeah. And, happenstance, another night out drinking in Korea, you start hearing what they're charging. Yeah. And the only difference between them and me was, oh, you have a large following. I don't. You're getting paid more than double I'm getting paid. The quickest path for me to make more money now is I need to do social media, become famous. Yeah. Oh my gosh, or I'm going to get I'm gonna get
left in the dust,
right? Well, and it's the same thing that happened in previous generations. The guitarists, the bassists, the session players, the vocalists, the engineers, they disappeared from the room. Well, who disappears next? And as sad as it is to say, with the onset of new tools, it's going to be the people who are perceived as tastemakers, who can execute on that like higher executive macro level, are the ones who I think are going to be seen as the ones who can take advantage of AI technology the best within the industry. And if a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it make a sound, right? Yeah. And I feel like that is going to be the dilemma that most behind the scenes people face, and it's going to come quick. So the self PR already has such a large benefit, and the potential benefit, or rather, avoidance of the detriment of no one knowing you and trusting you with with the sound is so large. I'm like, okay, I don't have a choice. I can't be behind the scenes anymore. I need to get in front of the camera.
You need to have a face. Put a face to the name.
The upside's too big to ignore.
Oh man, there's so many, like, as you're speaking, I was just so many things like rushing through my head that I'm just so curious about. I mean, I want to be sensitive of your time, so. But one that I did think of is specifically related to AI because it also impacts my work so much.
Of course.
Do you think the advent of AI music is gonna replace what you're doing or what the artists are doing?
So we've had very high level music generation AI for a moment now, right? And I expected the disruption to be immense, and so far the disruption within the industry has been quite minimal. What I'd say it's taken the form of is. Well, it's funny because right now the top song on Spotify is an AI-generated song, but it was also made by songwriters. And same thing with that Haven song, "Pull Me Closer," like that was all over TikTok. Also, that was AI-generated, but also made by veteran producers and songwriters. So these AI songs that are blowing up are also they're assisted by industry professionals every time so far. Now, and what's the immediate result of this? You have people in the industry using AI. And some of them are relying on it too much, and it's really actually it's hurting them more than it's helping them. Similar as if you heard of the whole ChatGPT psychosis thing.
I mean, with regards to people using it and like just self-diagnosing.
Well, not just self-diagnosing, but also losing the sense of reality. And
yeah. I've heard of that. Yeah.
So I think there's the same thing is happening here, and the people that are overly relying on the AI are losing their ability to create high-quality music. I don't want to say any names, but I was listening to a very large artist's upcoming album that he used a lot of AI to make, and compared to his old work, it was so much worse. And I'm just like, how in what world do you think this is as good as the stuff you've been creating before this? I mean, everyone here can tell this is not of the same caliber.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, and he was proud, like, did AI.
But I mean, I guess that's the thing. That's exactly what Ben Affleck was saying with regards to AI-generated scripts or movies. Is by the very nature of AI, it goes to the mean, right? It goes to the average. So it's going to create just your stock standard, simple, middle-tier, uninspired art. So whether it be music or film, it's never going to be the top shelf shit that we love that gets people famous and excited, right? I mean, if an artist is creating high quality music and then they come out and create something AI generated, you're gonna know it's not that good because it is just by its very nature not meant to be good. It's meant to be okay. And if you're great, okay is now bad.
Yeah, well, and that's I think that's the nail on the head, right? So the who benefits from this? The hyper creative people benefit greatly because a lot of tremendously talented musicians are too left of center and out of the box for their own good often. Well, this is an automatic tool that brings them into melody and song structures that have been done a million times and have worked because that's what the stuff's trained on, right? So the really creative souls, I think, will ultimately win off of this. And on the other side of it is the tool is best used by the people who are already good at doing it, as long as you don't overly rely on it. So the disruption I've seen now has been extremely minimal within K-pop, and even in the Western industry, I think it's a temporary disruption, but the disruption that's happened in the West is you used to have a new songwriter producer enter the room to work with an artist every now and then. A lot of the rooms have been more closed off because that new person that they're trying to get a new vibe with is now the AI. But I think that door will open up again in a year or so, and it's a temporary disruption. Now, that being said, who knows how much better these things will get and if they'll actually be able to see in the future and train off their own data, kind of like how AlphaGo did when it got better at playing Go, right?
Oh, yeah.
And develop new strategies. Maybe it gets to that point and, then we're all relevant.
I mean, yes and no, because at the end of the day, I mean, the reason why labels like HYBE are so successful is, as you mentioned, their ability to create super fans. And you can, I doubt that you can create a super fandom base around an AI artist because you're not going to be able to go and see them. You're not going to go and you're not going to be able to go and obsess about them, their lifestyle, their appearance changes, their trials and tribulations, their ups or downs, their scandals. We love that human aspect, not just the artistic human aspect of creativity, but also the human aspect of how infallible we are.
Well, the one crux to that is cartoons, animation.
Yeah.
We do connect with animated characters and they have been successful, and you can create that story in a 2D plane.
Yeah.
And I think
But you can't go and watch the gorillas. You can on a screen, but you still care about the singer behind the gorillas or Daft Punk, you know?
Well, and I think that's where, there's the K-pop band Plave, and I think that's been one thing that they've done so well is that the people that are voicing the characters are still former trainees or people of the industry, and this has been a redemption arc for them to be able to have a second chance at becoming musicians despite being behind of the voice behind an animation. Same thing with K-pop Demon Hunters as well, right? And so that has been successful, and for now we I think all these examples of successful animation has had humans behind it. Even Hatsune Miku, the Japanese animation singer girl, yes, it is. Even the voice is created digitally with a Yamaha software thing, the voice emulator, right? But it's still a human putting that together in a way. But Hatsune Miku, I think, is an example of one that there's not a human voice behind it, but it's also Japan. So what they say about economics, there's 4 types of economies: developed, developing, Argentina, Japan. And so you can never really look at the Japanese market and be like, this is going to work everywhere. But it worked there. So I mean, maybe it will get to a point one day where it works other places too. But I don't know how Japanese are we going to get.
Exactly, that's the thing. Like you might love the concepts coming out of Japan, but there are just so many things that do work there that have been attempted to be implemented in Western countries and just don't work because we don't share a culture with them. And the Japanese, I was talking to a friend about this just the other day. There's something special about the art that they produce there, whether it be the books, the music, the poetry. It's just so otherworldly that it's hard for us to replicate that in other cultures.
It's such a foreign perspective. And I think a lot of other cultures have their own version of this, like the French with the minimalism and like the noir stuff. That's what I was looking for, right? Swedes, we have our own darkness in our movies as well.
Yeah.
But in America, we all know what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
But but the storytelling, I think that's where again, Ben Affleck, I think, is on a point that is true for now.
But I mean, I don't think we should concern ourselves too much with what the far future might bring based on speculation, because we don't actually know what AI is how good it's gonna be, because it's been okay artistically thus far.
Well, again, the disruption is
minimal,
lot smaller than I thought it would be. It hasn't, I'm still getting, same amount of jobs coming in my way.
Yeah.
I think it's disrupted the amateur people trying to get into the industry.
Yeah.
The doors coming in, I think, have become narrower now.
Interesting.
Again, it might be temporary.
Yeah.
But as of right now, to get into the industry, because a lot of these sites where you'd sell beats for rappers.
Yeah.
Huge decline in sales because now the rappers are using AI beats, right?
Of course, yeah.
And so and that was a huge avenue for entry for a lot of producers. How you get a big song with a platinum selling rapper in America, you would just upload your beat and they would
use it.
Yeah, and they'd pay their $500 to get the beat but
they might want to work with you actually.
Exactly, and you'd have that credit. Suddenly you're on a triple platinum selling album in the States with Doechii.
Yeah.
I mean, that opportunity existed.
That opens doors.
Well, that opportunity is essentially gone now, which is sad because it doesn't affect those of us who are already in the industry. And I do think this is, remember I was telling you earlier how my life in 2022 before the money hit, while I had all the hits, is a distant memory. And, I think, okay, well, what is that perception in 10 years? Industry veterans, I think, forget what their avenue of entry was so quickly that it's difficult for them to empathize with the struggles of the aspiring creators, right? Yeah. And so who is fighting their fight right now? And it's sadly not anyone with power. And it's so I worry so much for the future generation of musicians that have this passion and love and dream, that the doors that they would have to use before to get in have now closed. And if you're an amateur musician, it's like you have to become a content creator to be seen, because now it's, you know, your network, your reputation is everything. You can't just be the product of your skills. They have, like, the showcasing of your skills is now becoming even more important. So, you know, it's everything I was saying earlier about once you achieve a certain level, showing yourself to the world in one way or another, whereas through the industry or outside or to the world,
it's necessary.
It's necessary, and you know, it wasn't necessary just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You could be an unknown and just be great at your craft.
Same
and
as acting.
Be huge.
Acting is the same thing right now. Influencers or singers are being cast for big budget projects just because they have more influence, more followers, and your acting ability is becoming not irrelevant but slightly less relevant just because you're a built-in marketing machine. You have the following, which means you could actually get eyeballs to whether it be Netflix or the movie theater seats, which is another issue in itself. I did want to ask you, out of all of the songs you've done before, what has been a favorite for you? What has been the best memory for you? Is there a This Is My Baby?
Oh gosh, Tiger Inside is for SUPERM. That's the baby. I mean, it was just such a pivotal turning point in my career. And you know, I remember when I made that,
Is that the MILF song?
Yes, that's the MILF song.
Okay. The MILF song.
It was a MILF song. You know, it was a Christmas night, so, you know, Dick in a Box was trending again, and it was fresh on my mind. I'm like, yeah, let's write a MILF song. And but you know, the thing is, even though the topic of the lyrics was that, musically, the beat itself is essentially one note, right?
Yeah. Like
it's just one root note going the whole way.
Yeah.
And so my job when I'm not the beat maker and I'm just songwriting over an atonal song essentially, or single tonal song, is I have to create the chords in my mind. I have to create the musical journey with essentially nothing to work with.
Yeah.
And so that was all right, the canvas is blank and it's massive. All I know is I'm working in this BPM, and that root note is my key. Everything else is up to me.
Yeah.
And musically, creating that journey that I did with that, and you know, I'm touching on everything from hip hop to, you know, MJ style, like super high notes, and it's really such a mix and mash of fairly difficult to execute things.
Yeah.
That as a songwriter, the skill display that I was able to do in that song, it's hard to replicate. And so many times after I made that song, there were because the labels they say, hey, we want a song like this.
Yeah.
No one's put out a song like that since then because it's so hard to do. And I was able to it was my screw you, I'm better than you to the rest of the industry. And that's and still to this day, I feel like it has that power. And so it's opened so many doors for me, and I felt it when I made it, and it actually did do that. So it was like,
you can feel like, oh, this is gonna be a good one.
Well, especially when you do something complex that's still easy to remember.
Yeah.
And it's very complex. When you like the time signatures that we're going through, everything is, and also just, you know, the small half-step note moves. It's a very complex song, but it's still easy to listen and capture the melody.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I've typically noticed that the complex songs that are still easy to digest tend to last.
Okay.
And that was one of them too.
Yeah. Man, it's been really interesting, really informative. I wish I could honestly go on for another hour, but I know that you're a busy man.
No, thanks so much for having me, man. It was great talking to you, Justin.
We're gonna have to do another one.
Absolutely.
I'm serious. Like we're gonna have to do a part 2.
We live in the same town. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the people that watch will have more questions, and then we can just throw those at you next time.
Oh, that sounds so much fun. Yeah. Please get in the comments.
Yeah.
Ask me anything.
Yeah. Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it,
See
man.
you next time. Cheers, bro. That was fantastic.
Hell yeah, man.
All right, congratulations. You've made it to the end of another lovely podcast. If you're interested in consuming another full-length one, click right over here. Go ahead. Do it right now.